Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Wednesday, everybody. The big news is, of course, yesterday, Li Qiang delivered his work report, laying out Beijing's goals and targets for the year. This is Li's first as premier, and the implications of the report are significant. The targets and policy direction were largely in line with what was expected. As we said yesterday, Beijing has set its growth target at around 5%, just like last year. And also, as we said yesterday, the question is, how much of this will be healthy growth? Local governments, many of which are grappling with the double-edged swords of surging debt and slowing economic growth and unemployment, will be expected to achieve this 5% growth target this year. Li Qiang admitted in his speech to the National People's Congress delegates, quote, "It is not easy for us to realize these targets. We need policy support and joint efforts from all fronts." End quote. Other goals included over 12 million new urban jobs, surveyed urban unemployment rate of around 5.5%, CPI consumer price index increase of around 3%, growth in personal income, and others. The 3% inflation target means the country is aiming for nominal growth of about 8% again this year. This very much adds to Beijing's challenges as China is battling the longest period of deflation since the late 1990s. Outlet Pekinology has provided a good comparison of this year's goals versus previous years, which we are now examining here. We also note that China raised its defense budget by 7.2% in 2024 to reach roughly 1.67 trillion yuan, $232 billion, a move the defense ministry called, quote, "conducive to peace and stability," end quote. On this theme, we also note, quote, "This year's work report did not include language about peaceful reunification in the section about Taiwan. Instead, it said, be firm in advancing the cause of Taiwan's reunification. Given the tweaks to the language in the readout of the Taiwan Work Conference to it is crucial to resolutely combat Taiwan independence separatism from it is crucial to resolutely oppose Taiwan independence separatist activities, are we seeing hints of a more impatient and assertive policy towards Taiwan in the works?" End quote. Seirong Global Times in an editorial wrote on the language change, quote, "Admitting peaceful reunification doesn't mean that the Chinese mainland will drop its pursuit of this goal. It signals that fighting separatism will be a more urgent and practical task for the mainland in the coming years when addressing the Taiwan question." End quote. Meanwhile, Li's work report also identified 10 so-called major tasks for 2024, namely 1. Striving to modernize the industrial system and developing new productive forces at a faster pace. As a quick aside, we note that the topic of his first speech to Xi Jinping's delegation was on these so-called new productive forces, in which he expressed, quote, "In the face of a new round of technological revolution and industrial transformation, we must seize the opportunity, increase innovative efforts, cultivate and grow emerging industries, plan ahead for the construction of future industries, and improve the modern industrial system." End quote. We should expect new productive forces to be a major new policy push from the centre in the coming months. We continue with the major tasks identified in Li's work report. 2. Invigorating China through science and education. 3. Expanding domestic demand. 4. Continuing to deepen reform. 5. Pursuing higher standard opening up and promoting mutual benefits, which includes the implementation of free trade agreements and, quote, "the reform of the World Trade Organization," end quote. 6. Ensuring both development and security and effectively preventing and defusing risks in key areas. 7. Making sustained efforts to deliver in work related to agriculture, rural affairs, and rural residents. 8. Promoting integrated development between urban and rural areas. 9. Enhancing ecological conservation and promoting green and low-carbon development. 10. Ensuring and improving the people's well-being and promoting better and new ways of conducting social governance. Okay, those were some of the drier details from the work report. Now, let's move on to the more interesting part, the analysis and implications. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, it's a huge help, as always, if you hit the like button and subscribe. For those who want to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, I rely primarily on subscriber support to keep going. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Economists argue that based on the work report, China's fiscal expenditure will be much higher this year than last year as the central government increases its budget deficit and sovereign bond sales. Thus, we can see how this around 5% growth will be achieved. More debt. Luo Zhiheng, chief economist at Yuekai Securities, told clients in a note yesterday that the budget deficit, special bonds, and ultra-long-term special government bonds that China plans for this year total almost 9 trillion yuan, $1.24 trillion US dollars, up almost 300 billion yuan or $40 billion US dollars from last year. Chinese financial media outlet Yicai writes that national general public budget expenditure will likely be 30 trillion yuan, up over 1 trillion yuan on last year. The government has set this year's targeted fiscal deficit to gross domestic product ratio at 3%. China also plans 140 billion US dollars of special ultra-long debt for the economy. This is only the fourth such sale in the past 26 years, with the most recent one in 2020 when authorities issued 1 trillion yuan worth of these bonds to pay for pandemic response measures. Thus, what was historically used as a special tool in a crisis is now, it appears, being employed just to maintain growth targets. Yesterday, the Ministry of Finance said, quote, "The deficit will continue to be mostly shouldered by the central government, which will step up transfer payment to local governments to help prevent and resolve local debt risks." End quote. However, this will mean that interest payments on central government debt in 2024 is forecast to increase nearly 12% from last year, representing the second largest outlay for authorities after only the defense budget. The proposed fiscal support and deficit were not enough to get markets excited. Some had hoped that Beijing was ready to take bigger steps to resuscitate the economy, for example, local government or property company bailouts, or handouts to households to increase consumption. Instead, the government offered no new measures for the property market and only talked about the need to boost consumer confidence. Ding Shuang, chief economist with Greater China at Standard Chartered, observed yesterday, quote, "It is very likely that the announcements will disappoint the market. However, the government has reiterated several times that it will not launch a strong stimulus." End quote. Wang Tao, chief economist at UBS, expressed, quote, "They could have done more, and the support could have been greater. They need bigger, explicit central government support." End quote. Chinese stocks listed in Hong Kong fell Tuesday after the key targets were announced. The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index slumped as much as 3% before closing at around negative 2.6%, the biggest decline in more than a month. On the mainland, stocks plunged but then ended up increasing in the afternoon. However, exchange-traded funds tracking Chinese stocks saw a surge in turnover. Quote, "A sign that state-backed funds are supporting the market after some investors expressed disappointment with the government's growth target." End quote, in the words of US-based Bloomberg. Indeed, a recent UBS report concluded that China's national team, ETF buying, has already reached $57 billion US dollars this year. The strategists at the Swiss lender estimated that ETFs tracking the CSI 300 index have accounted for more than 75% of the inflows. Interestingly, Xi Jinping's popular phrase that housing is for living in, not for speculation, was omitted from Li's work report for the first time since 2019, a sign that top leaders are still greatly concerned about the property market, as they should be. While Xi's phrase was dropped, his name was not. Xi Jinping's name appeared in his government's annual work report 16 times this year, the most since he took office more than a decade ago. Commentators were also quick to point out that in former Premier Li Keqiang's final work report, he had said, quote, "We owe our achievements in these 5 years to the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core." End quote. Whereas in this year's report, Li Qiang said, quote, "We owe our achievements in 2023 to General Secretary Xi Jinping, who was at the helm, charting the course." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Wednesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.